about the Indiana Council on World Affairs and all of our programs, please take a look at our website, indianaworld.org, or our Facebook page named, as you might expect, the Indiana Council on World Affairs. You'll also see these links written on the Zoom chat site. So in case you're not familiar with the Zoom viewing options, you'll find an icon in the upper right corner of your screen, which allows you to select active speaker mode, meaning that it will center the person who is speaking, versus gallery view, which lets you see everyone who has their camera on. I suggest that you select speaker mode during the presentation to be able to focus on our distinguished speakers, but you may also wish to switch occasionally to gallery view to take a look at the others who have joined the meeting and maybe search for your friends. You'll not be able to unmute yourself until the question and answer portion begins. And then you should only unmute yourself if you're called upon. So you'll find the mute icon in the lower left corner on your screen. There's a little microphone. And if you, when the time comes, you can unmute yourself as needed. Now, the vision of the Indiana Council on World Affairs is really quite simple, and that's nothing less than to promote world peace through better understanding. We're a nonpartisan, not-for-profit educational organization founded 65 years ago to promote international awareness, understanding, and connections in order to prepare Hoosiers and really all Americans to thrive in our increasingly complex and connected world and to enhance the region's global stature. So we work to foster public understanding of world conditions and U.S. foreign policy through forums, lectures, and academic competitions. We strive to understand various perspectives on the events shaping the world around us, and thus the views expressed by our speakers are theirs and are not intended to represent the opinions of our council, the board, or its members. So this evening, I'm pleased to recognize the newest member of our board of directors who's been elected since our last program, though he has long supported us as the quiz master for the Academic World Quest competition that we hold annually among teams representing Indiana high schools. He's Mr. Douglas Woodwell, Professor of International Relations at the University of Indiana. So welcome, Doug, and hello to you and any of your students who are online this evening. Our newest college intern is Ms. Adebola Ogundipe from IUPUI, who is serving as our Zoom host, and she is working behind the scenes to assure that the program proceeds smoothly. I want to thank the Indiana Economic Development Corporation for again sponsoring this evening's program. At this time, I'd like to introduce Jillian Turner, a member of our board of directors and the director of international programs at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, to extend her own brief welcome to the group. Jillian?
Hi, thank you, Larry. Hello, my name is Jillian Turner, and I am the Director of International Programs at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation and an Indiana Council on World Affairs board member. The IEDC is proud to sponsor the work of the Indiana Council on World Affairs. The IEDC is the state of Indiana's lead economic development agency. We serve Hoosiers by fostering economic growth and innovation across all sectors and industries, from advanced manufacturing and life sciences, and of course, agriculture. The Indiana Council on World Affairs has a rich history in Indiana, encouraging Hoosiers to think critically about the global political and economic landscapes, U.S. foreign policy, and the role that Indiana plays in shaping the future. And giving Hoosiers the opportunity to hear from international thought leaders like our distinguished guest tonight, the Distinguished Speakers Series is yet another example of how the ICWA serves the people of Indiana through its work to build a more global community. And given our topic tonight, I wanted to share a little bit about Indiana's agriculture, or ag tech industry, as we like to call it. Indiana has a rich tradition in agriculture, propelling agricultural innovations and technologies that help power the world. Hoosier farmers and the processes they supply play crucial roles in supporting global food markets while pioneering new methods to grow, process, and improve quality of those items grown. But across the state, Indiana companies are modernizing their operations and integrating new smart technologies and processes in order to improve their capacity and efficiency. We pride ourselves, though, on being a two-way street for trade and investment, with a focus on not only bringing Indiana to the world, but also taking Indiana back to the world. We're proud to host more than 1,000 foreign-owned businesses that together support over 200,000 Hoosier jobs. As we'll discuss tonight, the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted this global landscape, but Hoosiers are coming together to meet urgent needs and to build a future. And we're by no means hitting the brakes on the state's international outreach. While the economy continues to reawaken and travel remains a challenge, we appreciate events like the ICWA's Distinguished Speaker Series and others that encourage Indiana's international partners to speak on these critical topics. And now on to our speakers. In their role as leaders of major international nonprofit organizations, they're experts on the potential lasting effects of the COVID-19 crisis on global poverty and food security. I'm very excited to welcome them both to the ICWA's Distinguished Speaker Series virtual stage, and I look forward to hearing their comments on this important subject. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jillian. Now, the moderator for this evening's question and answers segment is another one of our board members, Dr. Kenneth Holland, who is President Emeritus of the American University of Afghanistan. So we encourage your participation in the Q&A session. There are two ways to do this. At the bottom of your screen, there should be several icons, and one of them should say chat. If you click on this, you'll be able to either type in a question for Dr. Holland to ask the speakers, or say that you have a question and would like to ask it yourself. So when you're recognized, you should unmute yourself by clicking the unmute button in the lower left corner of your screen. And after you've finished, you should mute yourself again. Now, before you type in your question, go back to the chat button. If you click it, a box will open at the bottom and it will say to everyone. Now, you don't want to send your question to everyone, but only to Dr. Ken Holland. So he's the moderator. So what you do is you click on everyone and it will then give you a list of everyone who's on the program. So you should scroll through to find Kenneth Holland, Holland, and then you click his name and your questions will go to him. So now it's my pleasure to introduce this evening's speakers, Ms. Abby Maxman and Mr. John Lyon. Abby Maxman is currently the president and CEO of Oxfam America, having joined the organization in 2017 and bringing with her more than 30 years of experience in international humanitarian relief and development and a strategic focus on addressing the policies and systems that perpetuate global poverty. She has influenced U.S. food aid policy and implemented large-scale food security programs in sub-Saharan Africa. Oxfam is a global organization working to end the injustice of poverty. Oxfam helps people build better futures for themselves, holds the powerful accountable, and saves lives in disasters. Prior to joining Oxfam, Abby served in a leadership roles in CARE International in Geneva and in CARE USA. She had previously gained experience in the US Peace Corps, the UN World Food Program, the US EPA, and the Department of Agriculture after completing her Bachelor of Arts degree at Colorado College and a Master's of International Administration from the School for International Training in Brattleboro, Vermont. John Lyon is currently the president and CEO of World Hope International. We're delighted that he has been able to join us on tonight's program at fairly short notice. John's not only a global development visionary, but also a practicing lawyer focusing on international law with 18 years of experience with World Hope. He previously served as general counsel for Jewel Africa, a London-based renewable energy company focused on developing hydroelectric and solar energy in Africa. John's foremost technical experience has been to develop water and sanitation plans for several World Hope locations, and he helped World Hope develop its microfinance and social enterprise program. His focus is on using markets to provide social impact in poverty-afflicted locations. John also served in the United States Peace Corps in Jamaica. And for those students on the line with interest in international careers, it's not unusual to see Peace Corps experience on the resumes of people like John and Abby. John holds a bachelor's degree from Houghton College and a JD from the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Law. Both John Lyon and Abby Maxman have witnessed the impact of poverty, injustice, war, and disaster firsthand, and believe the fight against global poverty and inequality is more relevant now than ever before. A warm welcome to both of you to our distinguished speaker program. Abby, would you like to start us off?
Yes, thanks so much. Adibolo, do you want to play the short video to kick us off, please?
We talk about humanity in percentages, the 1%, the 99%, but what would it look like if we could be the 100%? No longer divided by economics and opportunity, but standing together against injustice. What could we achieve? Oxfam believes we could end poverty and create a future where we talk about humanity in percentages, the 1%, the 99%, but what would it look like if we could be the 100%? No longer divided by economics and opportunity, but standing together against injustice. What could we achieve? Oxfam believes we could end poverty and create a future where everyone has the same basic rights, like access to clean water and food, and the opportunity to earn a living. The 1% won't get it done. The 100% will. By standing together, taking responsibility, holding the powerful accountable, and doing what's right, we can end poverty. It's not inevitable. It's the result of human action and inaction, and you can end it if you act now.
If you believe in social justice.
If you believe in basic human rights.
If you believe in equal rights independent of your gender.
If you think everyone needs a safe home.
If you don't think anyone should go hungry.
If you're 100% human.
You're with us.
You're with us.
You're with us.
You're with us. Are you?
Adibola, you need to unmute Abby. There you go.
There we go. I think I'm audible now. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And thank you again, President Cimino and the Indiana Council on World Affairs for inviting me and Oxfam to be at this event. I have the great privilege and honor to lead Oxfam America, one of the 20 Oxfam affiliates around the world. Oxfam's mission is to end the injustice of poverty, and we work in 90 countries around the globe, including this one. We help people build better futures for themselves, hold the powerful accountable, and save lives in disaster. Today, I want to talk to you about the COVID-19 crisis we're all living through and how this pandemic is deepening the world's hunger crisis. I know how privileged I am that, as a mother of 3, I've never had to worry about sending my own kids to bed hungry. Millions of mothers around the world are not so lucky, and I want to introduce you to Mama Fatima, pictured here. If you could show her picture. Adibola. Mama Fatima lives in the rural north of Kenya with her 10 kids, where she grows a variety of vegetables and fruits, mangoes, watermelons, hot chilies, green beans, tomatoes. But in recent months, her farm has faced a devastating series of events. First, a seething mass of locusts devoured her crops, taking literally everything with them. Adibola, do you want to show the next slide, please? Thanks. Next came flooding and cut off access to her farms and swept away machinery and equipment. COVID-19 dealt yet another blow. She told our teams, I can no longer enjoy 3 meals because of corona, floods, and locusts. Sometimes we forgo lunch or even breakfast because of the hardship. Now, unfortunately, Mama Fatima's story is not unique. Before the pandemic, worldwide, 135 million people were already determined as being acutely food insecure. And now, in the context of COVID-19, supply chains are disrupted, markets are closed, people are caring for loved ones in their homes, and there is less money to buy food. At the same time, food prices have increased because of production challenges from COVID, as well as ongoing shocks from the climate crisis and conflict. The devastating impacts of this pandemic have led the World Food Program, as you heard David Beasley just earlier, to warn of a famine of biblical proportions that could raise the number of people who are acutely food insecure to 265 million. In short, hunger is surging around the world and here at home. The current COVID-19 pandemic has revealed structural issues and inequality we still face in our current food systems, leaving more people going to bed hungry. Oxfam's recent hunger virus report showed that COVID-19 is deepening the hunger crisis in the world's hunger hotspots and creating new epicenters of hunger across the globe. We've highlighted 10 extreme hunger hotspots where the food crisis is most severe and getting worse as a result of the pandemic. Yemen, Democratic Republic of Congo, Afghanistan, Venezuela, the West African Sahel, Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan, Syria, and Haiti. Together, these countries and regions account for 65% of people facing crisis-level hunger globally. In the same report, we found that an estimated 12,000 people per day could die by the end of the year due to hunger linked to COVID-19. This food crisis is only further compounded in some areas by locust swarms that are attacking crops of farmers like Mama Fatima, and the increasingly catastrophic effects of climate change that continue to create gigantic barriers for food producers. This all exacerbates the existing gap between the poor and the wealthy, with women often feeling the effects more harshly. Women work predominantly as food producers and merchants, but can no longer depend on those income generators. We have found that when women do not bring home any income, that their chance of experiencing gender-based violence increases. With access to food limited, women will go without food to take care of the family first. There is no easy fix to this inequality in our world and in our food systems. Indiana's late US Senator Richard Lugar was a leader in encouraging international prioritization on food security, and the fruits of his Global Food Security Act have saved many lives during the pandemic. We're also grateful to Senator Todd Young for building on Senator Lugar's commitment. Everyone from government, the private sector, nonprofit, and across civil society must step up and continue this legacy and put an end to food insecurity, hunger, and malnutrition. Even before the pandemic, Oxfam was working to end food insecurity, and we believe that is possible. We know the world produces enough food to nourish more than the current global population, but it is not equitably accessible to all who need it. A recent Gates Foundation report that measures annual progress against the Sustainable Development Goals noted that 25 years of progress against these global goals has been lost in just the past 25 weeks, including against goal number 2, zero hunger. Oxfam is now doubling down on our efforts in a multi-pillar response, helping those who are hungry now, protecting smallholder farmers and those who work in the food supply chain, supporting social protection mechanisms for those most vulnerable to food insecurity, and advocating for systemic change. Oxfam has been working hard with our partners around the globe to meet the immediate needs of those suffering from the hunger pandemic in 4 main ways. First, by providing immediate food assistance in the form of distribution of cash, vouchers, and food directly to vulnerable households. Through our local partner, we've provided Mama Fatima and her family cash payments as a stopgap solution. We're working to reach 45 million people with food, in addition to clean water and sanitation services, to help meet immediate needs. Second, livelihood support and recovery. We're facilitating the safe functioning of markets and enabling access to seeds and inputs in order to maintain food production. And we're providing support to vendors, cash grants, subsidies, access to credit, infrastructure, and equipment that allow farmers to continue to operate, earn incomes, and provide food in their communities. For example, working with local partners, the UN, and the local governments, We're tracking the movement of locust swarms and spraying with pesticides the locust-infested area where Mama Fatima lives in its attempts to help farmers regain control of their fields. Third, we're building on existing advocacy efforts to protect food workers here in the United States, whether they work in the grocery store or in a poultry factory. Finally, we're working every day to build fairer, more sustainable, climate-resistant food systems to prevent future crises. Meeting the immediate needs of the hunger crisis is only half the equation. We're also pushing Capitol Hill every day to respond to food insecurity with the urgency the crisis demands. One example of this is our engagement around the Food Systems Reform Act this summer. We worked with the Senate to ensure they were prioritizing the right things in this bill, including increasing benefits in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program and ensuring fairness and equity in the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, especially for small-scale farmers. Thanks in part to this advocacy, the bill now brings a stronger climate and food systems lens to the issues and invests in a more sustainable, fair, and resilient food system. We were proud to join hundreds of national and local organizations in publicly supporting the bill and continue to work for its passage as a matter of national priority. Just this week, Oxfam endorsed the Feed the Future Congressional Resolution 728 on the role that U.S. global food security programs have played in reducing poverty and tackling hunger and malnutrition around the world, and calling for continued investment in global food security in the face of the economic impact of COVID-19. We continue to call on our elected officials to prioritize passing coronavirus relief now, assuring necessary life-saving aid when it's most needed. Through all our advocacy, Oxfam will continue to be a voice for American leadership in a multilateral response to the pandemic and the resulting hunger crisis. This is a time to strengthen international cooperation, and a global effort can only be successful with the world's most influential country at the table. Solving this crisis will require action from all of us. So I want to leave you with 3 ways that you can make an impact. First, reach out to your senators and encourage them to support a stimulus bill with no less than $20 billion in foreign assistance to fight COVID-19. This includes funds specifically for food assistance, cash transfers, and agriculture recovery activities with a focus on small to medium producers. Second, continue to show support to charitable organizations on the front line to support and respond to the pandemic with life-saving assistance. It could be your local food bank, your neighborhood association, or organizations like Oxfam and World Hope. Finally, find ways to get involved in the democratic process and hold your elected officials accountable. Mama Fatima has no voice in Congress, but you do. A global pandemic knows no borders, and none of us are safe until all of us are safe. The impacts of a broken food system will also be global. Only together, with each government, organization, and individual person doing our part, can we solve this whole global hunger crisis. As a country, we must all remember that we're only as prosperous and strong as the poorest in the world. As a global confederation of NGOs and working with our partners, Oxfam will continue to meet the immediate needs of food insecurity while fighting for systemic change. And as a fellow mother, I will not stop until Mama Fatima's children can sleep as soundly at night as my own. Thank you so much for having me today. I look forward now to hearing from John and taking your questions later.
Terrific. Thank you, Abby. So let me just start by sharing a little bit about World Hope. World Hope International is a Indiana public benefit company. We've been working in 15 countries since 1996. We focus on poverty alleviation through market and community-based programming, and including supporting direct investments into food systems locally. As the Secretary General of the UN recently pointed out, the world needs greater investment in local food systems. And this, I think, before COVID, 820 million people did not have enough to eat. The World Food Program, as David Beasley just mentioned on the air earlier, that now we have about 260. They're anticipating 260 million are going to be acutely food insecure, meaning starvation, as a result of COVID. Prior to COVID, 144 million children worldwide under the age of 5 are stunted, which means they are too small for their age, mainly due to malnutrition. COVID is causing this problem, as previously mentioned, because the food supply chains are now disrupted. There's disruptions caused by health screenings at borders. When food is moved across borders, it's being disrupted as a result of workers who get sick and can't go to work and process the food, clean the food, and deliver the food. There's also input disruptions. People can't get their fertilizers to grow the food, or they can't. There's all these kind of complications to the whole supply chain. This is compounded by the fact that COVID's causing incomes to drop. Currencies are, in many foreign countries, currencies are depreciating, which also creates pressure on incomes, as well as remittances. People who live abroad in places like the United States then send money home. Those remittances have gone down because employment has decreased. Unemployment has increased in places like the U.S. and Europe. So, with income being disrupted, with the supply of food, the food prices going up and income going down, the affordability of food is really challenged around the world. On top of this, some people are anticipating crops down the road to be shortages to occur because people will be eating their seeds now for immediate needs, as opposed to planting the seeds for later production. So I echo the Secretary General's call for increased investment in local food systems. This is Abby is correct. Everything Oxfam is doing is spot on. What we focus on at World Hope is more on just straight investments into local food security systems. We've been doing this in partnership with a terrific organization called Growing Hope Globally and other donors. We were specifically doing that in 2 countries, Cambodia and Sierra Leone. In Cambodia, we started pre-COVID. We hired an agronomist and started working with local farmers to trial various different agricultural innovations. One innovation that really stuck was a mushroom house. And so we introduced it to farmers. It was a group of women farmers. We trained about a dozen, and then quickly they on-trained 3x that number. That group of farmers quickly saturated that local village's market for mushrooms, and so we said, well, we're onto something now. So we then worked out a marketing program to distribute that food and sell it downstream into markets into Phnom Penh and around the country. When we started that distribution and selling process, Vietnam had over 100% of the market share for mushrooms in Cambodia. We now control 1/3 of that market share, which is locally grown and much more consistent. It was, this mushroom market wasn't subject to any kind of cross-border supply chain disruptions caused by COVID. Furthermore, the great thing about mushrooms is that they grow fast. 3 weeks, a farmer can plant. Within 3 weeks, farmers can go from planting to harvesting and receive cash for their sale. So there's a real quick turnaround on cash. So investing locally here has really shown that you stabilize the local production and you have improved farmers' income so that they can take that income and go buy more food, which typically they do, or they buy water and sanitation facilities and improve their health conditions. So this program has really continues to take off, and so now we're talking to 2 other NGOs that are doing have set up similar businesses, IDE Global and another group, and now we're now in talks about merging in creating a combined food distribution program, which will be the largest food distribution program in Cambodia. So we're excited about the on growth of that, and that will help our farmers diversify their crops and diversify their markets. Let me just show you a quick video on how it looks. So let me just a real quick video, and then I'll move on to some of our work in Sierra Leone. So thank you. So that's one program, direct investment we're making into the local food system in Cambodia. I think if we have more resources, we'd be doing this in more countries, and I think this is the one perfect cure for what is ailing the world's food security problem as a result of coronavirus. Similarly, we've made similar direct investments in local food production in Sierra Leone. In Sierra Leone, we had an opportunity to develop a juice factory through a co-investment with the Dutch government. And in that case, we worked with local smallholder farmers to grow pineapples and mangoes, and then process those create a market for smallholder farmers to sell into, and then we juice that into juice concentrate, and we develop markets into Europe, specifically Germany, Holland, and the UK. In 2011, when we got that business off the ground, that was the first value-added export that from Sierra Leone since the Civil War, and that was a terrific moment. that business is still in production, and since that time, the Dole Food Company has now entered into the Sierra Leone market and developed a 4,000-acre, $110 million investment to do additional pineapple work against a Walmart offtake arrangement with Walmart. So soon you'll be able to get Sierra Leone grown pineapples right in your Walmart store here in America, which is really super exciting. We've also done similar investments in food systems by investing in low-cost greenhouses in Sierra Leone, where farmers can grow food right in their backyard. One of the great things about greenhouses is that you can incubate if you plant a seed out in the open air, it's more likely, there's a higher risk that seed won't germinate and actually come to create a plant. Whereas in a greenhouse, you have a microclimate where you can actually incubate the seed, grow the seed, and then transplant it out to the farm once it's in a more survivable state. So we've done these kinds of food systems investments in Sierra Leone as well. I think some of the things that would be great to see happen across Africa, particularly in West Africa where we work, would be to see a greater investment in food systems, not only through the international community, but also from Sierra Leoneans and the residents themselves. In most places in the world, when you lose your job, there is no unemployment, right? The only thing you have to do next is go home and farm, and investing in people who can farm, investing in the food systems so that they can sell their food into it is a great way to create better stability in these countries. So I think call to action, what can you do about this? Support groups like Oxfam. Oxfam is doing great work around the world, particularly in advocacy at the Hill. Another great group that's doing terrific advocacy is Bread for the World. Oxfam and World Hope are doing direct investments with people in countries. So if you want to donate, that will be great. Also, if you're a farmer, we have a terrific relationship with a group called Growing Hope Globally. They have a Leviticus 19:9 program where farmers can literally leave the corners of their field for the poor, and it's a way for farmers to use their offtake of their farms to use for food programs like what Oxfam and what we're doing overseas. So Growing Hope Globally is also a great organization to get engaged with if you're a farmer. Terrific. Any questions?
Thanks, John. So it was a great presentation. Thank you, Abby. So we have quite a few questions, and just go ahead and start from the questions. So I guess, John and Abby, one question is the international situation. As we know, many advanced countries have programs where they protect, domestic farmers. So there are tariffs and other, phytosanitary barriers to imported food from developing countries. So do you think that these barriers of access to markets in developed countries, Europe, the United States, for example, is that really harming farmers in developing countries? And could we do more to open up our markets here in the United States and in Western Europe?
John, do you want to go, or should I? Go ahead. Okay. Oh.
Sorry. Oh, there we go. You can go first, or I can go first. Either way, I can answer as well.
Yeah, why don't you give it a start, and I can follow on.
Okay, terrific. Yeah. Well, from my experience in Sierra Leone, the phytosanitary rules that you see in Europe and in the United States, those actually caused us in doing this investment in Sierra Leone to actually up our game. And if we wanted to reach those markets from Sierra Leone, we had to up our game and be able to manage it. So I don't think that in my view, I don't think that's it's a bad thing to have high standards.
And I'll just
Please, Abby, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, and I'll just come in to say, as we are working with some of the smallholder farmers, and we're looking at supply chains that are often national, and so not looking so much as, especially at moments like now, of looking at the food security situation in country and not necessarily at the global supply chain, though both, yeah, I think that's where our focus is at the moment, especially in some of the high hunger hotspots.
Okay, another question is that many of the countries that face the greatest food insecurity also are places where there is civil war, and these are conflict-affected countries. So is one approach to addressing food insecurity to try to find some means of bringing ceasefires and peaceful resolutions to these conflicts? And what role could the United States and other advanced countries and international organizations play in helping bring peace to these places?
That's a great question. John, do you mind if I?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, the combination of conflict, climate, and COVID have been a horrible, devastating cocktail. And some of those places, the dramatic spikes in hunger, such as in places like Yemen, you saw the video at the beginning of the film with David Beasley, is actually, there's direct links. And we've been calling, as Oxfam and with the global community and the Secretary General, for a global ceasefire. This would have an immediate impact. We continue to make that call. And where there's violations, where that's not happening, it is devastating and people are at significant risk. In the case of Yemen, the US is a significant seller of arms to the protagonists in that conflict. So we have a huge role, and every time we have advocated successfully for ceasefires, it has opened ports, opened access to food and food pipelines for people who are on the brink of starvation. So if you look at Yemen, which was pre-COVID the world's largest humanitarian crisis with more than 22 million people at risk, that is an example where the direct link between conflict and hunger is there, and the US has such an ability to bring influence to help ceasefires happen and help them stick. Thanks.
Ray Montagno has a question. Ray?
Thank you, Ken. Really enjoyed your presentation, John and Abby. John, just a comment. Selling to Walmart is a double-edged sword. They expect you to lower your prices every year. But my question is, the COVID crisis has obviously created immediate needs. Has this crisis sort of interrupted some long-term security efforts in terms of making people more secure in the long term? And if so, is that a kind of short-term effect, or do you think this will have a lasting effect?
I think this is going to have a lasting effect in two ways. I think one, like I mentioned earlier, we are going to see some knock-on results as a result of the dip in income, the dip in supply chains. So people eating their own seeds, that's going to have a knock-on effect to next season or the season after that. But I also think there's going to be longer-term effects on this as the world starts to figure out how to mitigate this ever happening again. You're not only in the food supply system, you're also seeing this in the medical supply system, right? The United States is trying to figure out, like, how do we make sure we don't have any kind of shortages from N95 masks coming from China. We need to make them here. So the world's trying to figure out how do we deglobalize a little bit so that we can make sure that we can be food secure and secure in national elements, supplies that we need.
I would just add, thanks, John. It's an important question, and we've seen year on year over the past several decades progress towards some food security, towards the Sustainable Development Goal of ending hunger. Yet, in the past year, we've seen significant setbacks, and it will take a long time to rebuild. As I mentioned, 25 years of progress wiped out in 25 weeks. This is a devastating combination of events, and it will take a lot in the public policy arena, the sustained investments to really be able to build back more equal and more resilient and more sustainable.
I have a question here from Larry Cimino, and I'll read it. Many of us are interested in how the issues we feature are addressed by or affected by U.S. foreign policy. So how does U.S. foreign policy support or hinder your efforts at poverty reduction and hunger relief? Specifically, are you affected by the Mexico City policy, which restricts federal funding for groups involved in certain women's health services? Are you affected by the sanctions on regimes or countries like Iran that make it risky to provide various forms of aid, even if in theory, humanitarian assistance is exempt? Or in places like Iraq, are you directed to provide humanitarian assistance to specific minority religious communities, which can sometimes run afoul of the international understanding that humanitarian assistance be provided solely based on need? I guess, Abby, you want to go first?
Sure, thanks, Kenneth. It's a really important question. Oxfam America has a longstanding policy since our genesis 50 years ago, where we do not accept US government funding because we believe our independent voice and actions are actually fundamental. We know that the US has a disproportionate impact on the world, positive or otherwise. And when the US exerts its leadership, it can actually have a significant positive knock-on effect. All that's to say is, how do those policy issues affect our work? Obviously, they affect the people that we serve. When we look at things like the Mexico City policy that can have devastating, restrictive impact on women, on girls, on families. And similarly, we're not operational in some of the countries where you mentioned, but in others, anytime there are sanctions and the humanitarian needs of people are increased, it has an impact on our work. And so that's why we do a joined up approach in terms of whatever we're doing with local partners and our teams on the ground. We are looking at the direct connection of how we bring our voice, our research, our evidence to policymakers in the United States to help them understand the impact of any of these policies on those who don't have a voice and who are most marginalized.
Great, thank you. John, would you like to add anything?
Sure, I can add a few, some of my own experiences. I'd say, at least in some of the countries where we've operated in, MCC has had a really outsized role in influencing the local governments, and particularly in Africa. MCC has a program whereby if a country meets certain benchmarks around anti-corruption, anti-human trafficking, gender-based violence, all these kinds of transparency, all based on independent metrics. Once they achieve that, they'll get a major grant to do something that the country is interested in themselves. It could be solar, or energy, could be food security, could be anything. And what I'm seeing is that countries really do chase that funding and improve their governance as a result. Many of the problems in the world are a direct result of poor governance by the countries that we're in. And I think focusing on improving those governance systems is a great thing for U.S. policymakers to push.
Good. Another question has to do with China. As we know, China is very active in many of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and they seem to be mostly interested in extracting natural resources from these countries. But are the Chinese also active in addressing hunger and poverty in these countries? Or is that an area where the United States and the West are more actively involved?
It's a great question. John, should I go? It's an excellent question. I lived in Ethiopia for 8 years, and over that span of 8 years that I was living there, I watched the investment in roads, infrastructure, but also land grabs, 100-year leases to help develop agriculture production in remote parts of the country, really transform the country. Because when I first started going to Ethiopia about 15 years prior to my living there, there was a lack of infrastructure completely. And we know that the Chinese investments in infrastructure is significant. And there's a lot of partnerships and collaborations between governments. At the same time, in terms of development, there's questions about different approaches and different methodologies, but there's been massive amounts of investment in sub-Saharan Africa and in Asia, as you rightly note, that have actually helped enable supply chains in those countries. But there's that double edge, as you rightly note, as well, about extractives and investments that have undermined local populations' ability to own, the land rights, the land grabs in these long-term leases have adverse effects. But John, why don't you pick up? And
Sure. I mean, I can speak from my own experience. I just my work in West Africa, we've really seen a huge pickup in investment from China. On the good side, it's a great investment. Like Abby said, these countries are getting better infrastructure. They're getting investment that was really sorely needed. One of the downsides of China's aid is that almost none of it is grant money. It's almost purely loans that are secured with step-in rights. So if a country fails to meet their loans, they can step in and take over the asset that was built. That's happened now in a couple places. Once there's a large port in Sri Lanka that the Chinese built. Sri Lanka couldn't pay the note, and China stepped in and took the asset. The other downside of Chinese investment is that China does not have the same corruption standards, foreign corruption standards that the United States does, or most European countries do, and so you see a lot more corruption happening as a result. I mean, just anecdotally, when I go to the airport, the Americans get pushed through, and the Chinese, the guys at the airport are like asking for bribes. It's because they never pay. That is actually that is a serious problem. The other problem with Chinese aid is that it's not as transparent as U.S. and European aid. So as a result, when an organization like the World Bank or AFDB or the multilateral banks are making loans for whatever, it's really hard to understand what other loans China has made in the same country. So they can't get an accurate picture of the credit quality of the country that they're making the investment in. So I think that has created a problem as well.
Great.
Yeah,
Please, Abby.
Oh, I was just going to say, this is an example where U.S. leadership in the world and paying attention and continuing the significant investment and engagement in multilateral mechanisms, in foreign aid, and being a leader, a global leader on human rights, on democracy, on investment, on development. And as the U.S. voice and role and leadership is diminished, that creates significant risks. And China is certainly, we're watching as there's as the U.S. and has turned away. There's quite a lot of action and activity by China without the U.S. at the world stage, and so we continue to look forward to the U.S. stepping up in multilateral and global arena on the issues of human rights, democracy, and transparency, as John also said.
So Abby, I wonder if you could follow up with maybe a more full discussion of how the diminution of American leadership in international organizations and on the world scene has affected our allies like Canada, the European Union. Have they been also more reluctant to step forward when they see America stepping back?
That's a really good question. I don't think it's a question of reluctance. I think it is, there's sort of probably the size differential of influence, and certainly an ally who our traditional allies have relied on for so long, not being counted on, has massive, really significant implications on global peace and stability. So I don't think they have stepped back as a result, but I think it has required a recalibration and a question of how to engage when the U.S. has deviated so far from its traditional position and commitment to promoting global democracy, good governance, the rule of law, and being a good investor and collaborator and partner in global development.
Okay. John, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be an interesting election. I'm looking forward to it being over with. But yeah, I would agree. I think our position in the world greatly diminished. And I hope that can change. You look at words have consequences, and when our president says we need to get rid of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, we're hamstringing our companies abroad, that what does that tell people overseas? When we I remember one story. I think Rex Tillerson, the former Secretary of State, said, they were in a room with a group, and President Trump said, "Oh yeah, we need to get rid of that Foreign Corrupt Practices Act." And Rex Tillerson said, "No, wait, let me tell you a story." He was trying to do an oil deal in someplace in the Middle East, and he got told he had to pay a $5 million bribe to be able to get this deal, and he just walked out. He said, "We don't pay that." And they came back to him and said, "Well, we're going to go ahead and give you the deal even without the bribe." So, we need a country that can protect our investors with a law like that.
Abby, I wonder if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on Jillian's introduction and explain how your advocacy work on Capitol Hill could benefit Indiana farmers.
That's an excellent question. I might even draw in my colleague who's with me, who leads our food systems program, Dr. Latte Lawson, because I want to make sure I am getting into the details in the right way. So Latte, do you want to step in and comment on that? Oh.
Hi, Abby. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great privilege to be here with Abby and you all tonight. Yeah, we have been doing a number of advocacy as Abby presented, and the way we look at it is really from the U.S. perspective, but also globally. Some of the bills that we've been pushing are really meant for the farmers here in the U.S. to be able to take advantage of some of the investments from the U.S. government. So instead of looking into more industrial agriculture, we've been advocating for the U.S. government to also support more small and medium scale farmers here in the U.S. because we believe that they are the backbone of the foods, especially when you think about healthy, nutritious foods. So we believe that those small scale and medium farmers have really great potential to continue to nourish the U.S. And also when you think about the whole nutrition and healthy diet perspective, we believe that investing with small and medium farmers have more potential to get to that kind of result. And lastly, we also look at it from a climate change perspective, right? Because big industrial agriculture, although has created a lot of efficiency, but what we found is when you look at the soil health, for instance, big industrialization has not done good with the soil health. So we also try to promote more climate smart, more regenerative agriculture, and we are pushing the US government to really invest in that. So yes, so we believe our advocacy with the US government on the Hill has great potential to benefit farmers here in the US and hopefully around the globe as well. And more and more, we're also looking into the diversity as well. So, all kind of farmers, women farmers, Black farmers, Latinos farmers, everyone can really benefit from this investment. So that's what we're trying to do on the Hill. Over to you, Abby. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Abby, I wonder if you could elaborate more on how your work, and John, also your work, specifically helps raise the income of women in the countries where you work.
Great, thank you. John, do you mind, or do you want to? I keep stepping in. Well, we actually look at, we know our work historically has showed us that when women and girls are at the decision-making tables and have a voice in how decisions are made, that families are healthier and wealthier, period. It just helps. It's a race to the top when we are involving women and focusing on women farmers, smallholder farmers, looking at their role in the value chain. They're often the producers, but they're excluded from certain aspects of supply chain. So we always do a gender analysis in our work, in our programs, to make sure that we know whose voices are we hearing and why, who is most excluded in the work, and analysis to help us determine the approaches that are going to ensure that women farmers and women's voices are involved in our processes. I might want to ask Latte to add on, but John, you might want to come in first.
Oh, sure. I mean, Abby's spot on. Everything she said was absolutely true. I think just to get maybe to put that in context, like our mushroom project that I shared about earlier started out focusing completely on women. What we found in Cambodia is that the men would be out working in the rice fields, the women would then do these mushroom projects, and as a family unit, they'd be doubling their income as a result of this additional investment. So we're always looking for ways we can work with women, because of, as Abby said, it does create a race at the top. Women, when women have money, the kids are more likely to go to school, more likely there's going to be food on the table. It's investment in women is the way to go.
Latte, would you like to add something?
Yeah, sure. No, I think we really look at women in our food work. Just to give you a couple of illustrations, is like in Africa, we have a program called Female Food Hero. It's really meant to promote women's role in agriculture and their leadership. So we have this program in a number of countries: Ethiopia, Ghana in West Africa, Tanzania, Burkina Faso. So many countries where we really look at how we can raise the voice of those women, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who really work harder than men. So many of those women are really leaders in those countries, and they've been able to even sit at the table with policymakers to really help them to understand, the constraints and policy barriers, and push for a change. So in a country like Burkina Faso, the government has passed a law to really give land access to women as a result of that, because traditionally women are excluded for land tenure. They cannot own land. So because of our work with our policy, women are now able to own land. They have a title that they can use. They can go to the bank and get access to loan, etc. So we really try to push for that. And one other example is also working with the governments in those countries to really pass the budgets in a we call it gender responsive budgeting. So we really work with the government so they understand the gender aspect, especially women aspect of their budgeting, and they can really put the resources behind that too, so they can support those women in agriculture. So we have many examples like that, but yeah, so definitely women are really center of many of the things that we do, even our work with the private sector as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Abby, when Oxfam goes into a developing country where there's food insecurity, I'm sure the impulse is to provide food assistance directly to those who need it, but also Oxfam must work with national governments and local governments. So how do you go about this difficult situation where you have to work with the governments in order to provide assistance to those who most need it?
Thanks, it's a great question. We are often in countries for a long period, and so we have entered countries often on the heels of disaster, but then we're there for a longer term. And we have country program strategies that help form our approach in a country. And so our collaboration is with the host government, local partners. We work with thousands of local partners around the world. We're very few cases where we are doing direct delivery of services, but we do that on exceptional circumstances. So our approach, if you look at an example like in Ethiopia that has a large-scale the Productive Safety Net program, which is a large-scale social protection mechanism. Many years ago, more than 10 years ago, Oxfam's voice was key at the table, working with government, working with donors to look at the issues of chronic food insecurity and how to set up a national-wide approach to prevent and protect 8 million of the most chronically food insecure people in the country, and then develop approaches to look at graduating people off of the need for food aid over time. So that's an example where Oxfam, both at the policy table and the operational table, and you look over a multi-year trajectory of Oxfam's role in a context like that. But there's many similar or many other examples where working with local government, with local partners, with where appropriate and possible, like John was talking about, the private sector linkages, is really core to our approach.
Great. And John, you want to talk a little bit about your experience working with host governments and local governments? Sure.
I mean, every country is very different. That's the I'd say in some countries they're much more difficult to work with. I think my own experience, Haiti is a very difficult government to work with. Cambodia has been more progressive, easier to work with. Philippines has been easier, more progressive to work with. It's just it. But I think one thing, what Abby's methodology is spot on. This is what we're doing too, is to establish really local organizations registered in country and to have regular communications with local government. That really eases the process to make it easier to work there.
So I have a question about the International Monetary Fund. How the use of releasing special drawing rights from the IMF might help poor and middle income countries cope with COVID and COVID-related economic crisis.
It's an excellent question, and it really falls on the eve of the fall meetings that we participate in with the international finance institutions, the IFIs and the World Bank, which is in the next couple weeks. As Oxfam, we have been advocating, as we have been assessing the situation. Back in April, when the G20 meeting with G20 finance ministers, and to look at debt cancellation or suspension of debt, and also proposing use of the special drawing rights. For those who don't know, that's a reserve that can allow countries to draw down and assure that they can invest in things like the health response to COVID, for example. And we found in our analysis, and we have some reports for those who may be interested, that just by the debt burden that many of these countries pay is more than they invest at a current moment in time in, say, their health system. And so just the suspension of debt repayment and being able to use the special drawing rights can have a significant impact on the country's ability to respond to these, multiple crises, the convergence of COVID, climate, conflict. And so, unfortunately, however, the debt cancellation and the use of the special drawing rights has not gone far enough. And we will be bringing our voice again in the upcoming IFI meetings and World Bank meetings next week or the next 2 weeks to continue to put pressure on G20 and others and the bank and the UN to advocate for using the special drawing rights and permanently looking at debt cancellation in a more significant way.
Could you elaborate more about the debt cancellation, Abby? How could that be a good thing for these countries?
Well, in some ways, the debt repayment is very high. And so the concern, some countries are hesitant to have their debts canceled because what that might do to their ability to have other loans. And so the systemic need to look at and analyze and make sure that it would not have impact on their credit worthiness for future needs to be part of the equation. Sorry, John, you were about to come in.
Yeah, John, please.
Like I said earlier, I think these discussions of the IMF are a lot more complicated now with China because China is such a huge credit provider, and they're not at the table offering debt relief. This is more of a G20 or U.S. European debt cancellation conversation. So, what would be nice to see is China offer up some debt cancellation along the way. But all of this is a critical thing to do because what we're seeing is these debt loads are causing the devaluation of their currencies, and that's creating, as I said earlier, a problem with food affordability. So it's all linked.
John, we have a question for you. You mentioned earlier your work with Walmart. Could you elaborate on the role that large multinational corporations like Walmart could play in helping provide markets for local farmers in some of these developing countries?
Okay. Yeah. Well, first of all, we worked with Dole to help bring their investment in. They made an investment against an offtake arrangement with Walmart. Really interesting. Most of pineapples for Dole are made either in the Philippines or in Central America, and so they were looking for a better location that reached the American and European markets because the Asian markets were capturing most of their Philippine pineapples. So they looked for an African market, and they landed on Sierra Leone. AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, was intended to really stimulate these types of investments in Africa. Go invest in Africa, and then you come sell that market, sell that offtake into the United States. It's been challenging for food producers to be able to access the market because of the scale. I remember talking to a woman in West Africa who had a clothing manufacturer. She was making clothes, and so her dream was to make sheets for Walmart. So she got USAID offered a kind of a meet and greet type of opportunity under AGOA, and she found some folks at Walmart, and Walmart's like, "Great, we want to buy African-made sheets. Can you make 1 million of them daily?" So it's really hard to hit that scale. So I think it's a good law, but it's just going to take a long time for the markets over there to develop to be able to reach American markets. So if Walmart would change its buying practices and buy in smaller bulk, that would be a probably an interesting opportunity. Maybe that's an opportunity for their competitor Amazon to try. So.
Kenneth,
Abby,
could I come in
please.
on this?
Yeah.
It's such a good question, and I'd like to mention just 2 campaigns. We have a lot of work on this, where a campaign we called Behind the Brands, where we targeted the 10 largest food and beverage companies in the world to look at their practices on land rights, gender, and climate, basically. And over this 10-year period, it significantly changed their practices, and we've become a real critical friend to all the big names that you might know, from Coke, Pepsi, etc. We also have an ongoing campaign called Behind the Barcodes, where we're looking at the 8 largest global grocery stores and looking at the procurement practices in them and in those organizations, and Walmart's included. And we have a few other examples on rice procurement in Asia with Mars, and a living income approach with Mars that if we can share more information about. But the ability to influence procurement practices of organizations of companies like Walmart is possible. We've seen it. We've been part of looking at, I think some of the greatest impact we've had is when you change the procurement practice of a company like Walmart, that is the ultimate impact. It changes the lives for millions of smallholder farmers in one fell swoop.
Yep, totally agree.
Okay, we have a question I'd like both of you to respond to. Could you elaborate on the impact of climate change on food insecurity in developing countries?
John, I've been going first. You can go first.
Go ahead, Abby.
Oh, well, the impact is significant. We know that those who are disproportionately affected are those who are not the producers of the climate emissions. It's the inverse, those who are suffering most. And we see the drought in the Sahel, floods and locust infestations, the frequency of cyclones and storms. It is just huge, the impact on farmers and on our work in developing countries. I don't think there is a country that is not affected, both global north and global south. But the impacts on those most vulnerable, we have reports and studies that show time and again that those most affected are those who are least responsible for it and least able to cope. And so it's the poorest who suffer most. That's women and girls and other marginalized communities.
John?
Yeah, no, totally agree. That's, I think we've been looking at like our greenhouse program. That's a climate change mitigation program. If you can create a microclimate to grow something in. So I think we need to be looking at the reality of climate change. Let's accept it, and let's look for opportunities to innovate and mitigate it. Not only just try to change the carbon emissions and other things that the Paris Accords have called us to do, but also look for opportunities to mitigate the effects of climate change on the poor. So yeah, further investment like in the Green Climate Fund would be something I'd really push for.
Great. So we have a question about nutrition and obesity. So the question is, do you confront problems of lack of understanding of what nutritious food is, what a nutritious diet would be? And then secondly, are you also seeing growing instances of obesity in developing countries?
Personally, I'm not seeing issues of obesity. I'm seeing more issues of stunting and the opposite effect of having a lack of nutrition. You can have a lot of food, but it can lack nutrition in the process. So making sure that particularly kids are eating nutritious food is totally critical. So tackling that from a advocacy point of view, but also from a food security point of view is totally critical. And also creating the health systems to be able to monitor for kids that are going to be stunted. So we participated in those programs in West Africa with UNICEF and through community health worker programs. So continued investment in early intervention health programming and early intervention food security programs is totally critical.
Yeah, well, it's I'm going to ask Latte to step in. I'm very excited. And Latte, why don't you come in? Because it's an excellent question on the obesity piece, and we've done a lot of work under Latte's leadership on this.
Yeah, no, thanks, Abby. We call this issue the double edge because on one hand you have the malnutrition, undernutrition, which John alluded to. We have kids, children in developing countries really stunted. They cannot achieve their growth potential, which has a lot of issues on the future, and also the intellectual ability. So we see that issue a lot, and we work on it. But what the trend we also seeing is the obesity actually. And you see that mostly in cities, like when you look at cities in Africa, Lagos, Ethiopia, for instance, Addis Ababa. So you see that, and also the trend is because of emergence of fast foods. Fast food is going to many countries in the developing world. You go to Manila in the Philippines, etc. So those two issues are now emerging. It's still a big issue here at home, obviously, but that's obesity. Also, diabetes is really becoming. Is on the rise. It's quite hidden, so you can really see because many developing countries don't have the infrastructure to detect that and prevent it. But from some of the study that we've seen is on the rise, and we are working with a group, even foundation like the Rockefeller Foundation here now that are really trying to look at obesity and healthy diets as a way to really solve that, and education as well. And so we have a lot to do on the issues and advocacy with government to reduce sugar consumption, and also the penetration of fast food companies in their countries is something we are interested in.
Good. We have a question about the long-term effects of the coronavirus pandemic in the developing world. We all expect there will be an effective and safe vaccine available widely, perhaps in 2021. But do you think there will be systemic, lasting impacts of the coronavirus pandemic in the developing world?
I'll start. We're already seeing the impacts. Actually, is a bit of there's been a unfortunate consequence already is a reduction in some important vaccination programs that are already ongoing. So we're seeing, because the resources on the global humanitarian response plan has called for it's $10 billion to invest in the response to date. As of now, that's only been resourced at 28%, and that's for all aspects of the humanitarian response: health, food, water, sanitation, hygiene. And so all of the current resources that go into global vaccination programs, et cetera, are suffering. And we've heard reports of in Niger where previous programs are declining. So there's a risk of setbacks, not just COVID, but the consequences, the byproducts of the stress and strain on the systems. Now, we as Oxfam are calling for a people's vaccine, and we're currently, we can share some information around that, of looking at when a vaccine comes forward. It's not just those in wealthy countries who are purchasing to hoard it, but looking at where the need is greatest and where the highest risk people are in the US and elsewhere. And so until vaccines for the COVID are produced at the scale needed, there is a way to target the most vulnerable. And that's something else that we can share some information with you about.
Great. And I know you've had a lot of experience in Ethiopia. And so there's a question about the Nile Dam in Ethiopia. Do you think that'll have a positive impact on food security, not only in Ethiopia, but in other countries of Africa?
That is a really good question. I might ask Latte to come in, and I know Tashome is on the line from Indiana University. He probably has some thoughts on that as well. It's a huge project. I think you all are aware that right now Ethiopia has suspended flights over the dam. It's a very high conflict situation. So. And Latte or Tashome, would you want to come in on this issue?
Yeah, no, I would just say it's a highly sensitive issue. Yeah, very political. And I think a couple of weeks ago, the U.S. government also suspended some aids to Ethiopia because of that issue. So it's becoming really geopolitical issues between Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan. So hopefully this will be resolved peacefully, but it's becoming very sensitive.
So we have a question about the Green Revolution, which obviously reduced hunger around the world. So is there now scientific research going on at Purdue University and other land-grant universities in the United States that could have the same kind of impact that the Green Revolution did?
John, do you come in? I can't comment on what research going on at Purdue or elsewhere, but why don't you come in?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can speak to, one partnership we had. There's a greenhouse project we did in West Africa. We did that in partnership with Penn State University. They had this really great program to trial different low-cost technologies, and we took that to USAID. They funded it, and we were able to scale it with grant funding and then investor funding. Yeah, I mean, there's some really great programs at land grant universities. I don't know about Purdue, but yeah, I would say I would encourage the large universities to work with organizations like Oxfam, us, other organizations, and partner up so that they can take what they're learning at the universities and implement them in poverty-afflicted places like where we're working.
So Abby, in your work, do you see the positive impact of advances in technology and science?
Oh, well, absolutely. Especially when the sustained investment can reach places to make real lasting change. There's a number of examples. And John, do you want to come in? And Latte, you'll probably have some specific ones you'd want to share.
Sure. I mean, I think innovation is how we're going to keep feeding a growing worldwide population. With the Green Revolution was great, but we also found problems in some of the some of the things that were done. Some of the over, too much use of chemicals, too much use of things. But we're learning and we're adapting. And I think as long as we keep investing in research, keep investing in the promise of technology, I think the world will be a better place.
Latte, do you want to share an example?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think innovation is the way to go. That's obviously we can't avoid it, and that's just looking at the growing population and the hunger issues. I think this is one breakthrough. And in many of our programs as well, we support farmers to really embrace innovation, looking at new ways of growing foods, new type of seed, hybrid seed that can really grow quicker. You look at like cassava, even food fortification to try to bring more healthy diet and nutrition outcomes. So definitely this is something we embrace and support farmers. Even rice, we have a big rice program in Asia. So looking at how they can continue to grow, but with less water. So we call it sustainable rice intensification. So, you know, looking at this kind of technology to really help to continue to grow with small land of, but trying to maximize production while keeping, you know, the soil health at a very good level. So we see the option as really a breakthrough, and also more and more with the new technology like blockchain, using that. Like in Cambodia, we have a rice initiative where we use blockchain as a technology to connect farmers to buyers in Europe. So like when you sit in Europe, you can track where your rice is coming from. Is it organic? And you know, what's the cooperative that has produced that rice for you? And also those farmers can be able to receive payment very easily. So we see the technological breakthrough as a very positive, actually. You know, this kind of, we also have what we call the Uber tractor, where farmers can now book tractor on their phone, so someone can just come in and to plow the lands because of the technology. So we see a lot of technological breakthrough in this area of foods. Farmers can also access price, you know, just quickly on their phone, and they can know where to sell their food or where not to sell, etc. But the flip side that we're also looking at is what we call the rights in the digital age. Because while many farmers are taking advantage of this, we also are concerned about data privacy, so we can protect those farmers, and also make sure that the accessibility is for everyone, not just for a small few. But overall, we are really excited about the technological breakthrough and the potential that it presents.
I'd also add, as we advocate with Congress, keep advocating for investment in the labs. Each agency has its own lab that they're investing in these types of technology. So USAID has really heavily invested in a lab under this administration that got de-invested in, but bring it back. We participated in USAID's lab called Securing Water for Food. And there was some really great technologies that were really helped to incubated and scaled through that program, including salt tolerant foods, irrigation methods that can make it easier for farmers to irrigate crops. So anyway, the labs, the agency labs are great opportunities to look at these types of how technology is being used to support food security.
Well, I want to thank our participants for providing such fascinating and insightful questions. And I want to thank John and Abby and Latte for providing such informative answers. And I'll now turn the program back to Larry. Larry?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. And thank you, John Lyon and Abby Maxman and Latte Lartego. I think we learned that the proportions of the issues you raised are truly astounding. You used the term biblical. Virtually any adjective I could think of seems trite in comparison to what's going on. So it's something we really need to know about, we need to respond to. Also, as you mentioned, Abby, Oxfam is an organization focused on the injustice of poverty. And if Oxfam is up for it, next year I'd love to have you hopefully come back in person to Indianapolis and do a program on what you're doing to alleviate some of those basic fundamental issues around poverty in the world.
I'd be honored. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. I want to thank Ken Holland for managing our Q&A interface. And thank you again to the Indiana Economic Development Corporation for their generous sponsorship of this evening's program. And thank all of you for joining us again this evening. Our next distinguished speaker will be on Thursday, November 19th, and it will feature the former director of the Division of Mental Health of the World Health Organization, Dr. Norman Sartorius. He's going to be coming to us live from Geneva in Switzerland. So we're going to start that program an hour early at 6 p.m. Eastern, because that's already midnight in Geneva, and he's willing to stay up for us. We'll remind you of that when we send the announcements out to the program. But truly, we value all of your participation and your support. These forums allow us to increase our knowledge and understanding of the world, and at the same time to interact with subject matter experts and those who form or influence US policy on these subjects. So please stick with us and support our programming. We invite you all to join the Indiana Council on World Affairs wherever you are as a member, to renew your membership if you are a member for this season. What you do can help us with our educational outreach programs and have more programs like this. We can be found at indianaworld.org. So everybody, stay well, pay attention to the world around you, and I hope to see you all again very soon. Thanks again to Abby Maxman. Thanks again to John Lyon, and good night to everyone.
Thanks.